Everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. David Cruz. I'm excited to have David here with me. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy that you're here. You're going to really give us a lot of insights on exercise, performance exercise, and of course, rehab, because you own the #1 online rehab site, Web Exercises. You've been a sports chiropractor for 18 years. You've treated many athletic injuries, everywhere from weekend warriors to professional athletes. And for me, one of the most interesting things is that you believe that both the patient and provider education are the key to outcomes. And I think that's why you did Web Exercises. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. You know what? As a clinician, we all have our challenges. So if I can find a way to make it easier for providers to get their patients some simple, great exercises, and then make it easy for the patient, I think it's a win-win overall.
The conversation piece of 2024 is without question longevity. And one of the tenets that everybody's talking about in longevity is exercise and, weight resistance, cardiovascular, what to do, etc. So I know that you're going to lay some interesting terrain. You're going to take a nice blank canvas and make it a colorful tapestry for everybody here. That said, what are the effects, or what are the cardiovascular effects of exercise?
There are so many, especially coming out of COVID. I think really COVID changed our mindset a little bit. I'm in California. We were locked down. I know you were locked down, and depends on what state you were, you couldn't go place and so forth. It changed the world. But if you look at one thing consistent before or after, now there's so much data afterwards. The one biggest thing people could do to really prevent the severity of COVID was exercise. Last year, a study came out that what they looked at was close to 50,000 patients at, I think it was 4 or 5 different Kaiser hospitals between January of 2020 to, I believe it was November. And they looked back and said, okay, we want to see the level at just general activity. And they broke people down into 3 categories. People that exercise 0 to 10 minutes, 11 to 150 minutes, and then over 150 minutes a week. And then so when they crunched the data, there's a clear linear relationship to the severity of COVID and your exercise level and how fit you are. And so I think that's what really became more to the forefront in the sense of, okay, what are those effects on general health with exercise? We all know we should do it, but it goes so far even beyond that. I mean, if you look at what exercise helps, I mean, it can be anything from cancers to different inflammatory diseases to pain, all sorts of metabolic, syndromes and so forth. Exercise across the board is one of the most beneficial things. And, we've had some experience working with the UCSF and the local hospital in Marin County, where they have a cancer exercise program where a lot of the pre and post cancer patients join this exercise program. And they really find that the outcomes are a lot better when people move, when people exercise. So we see it locally, but I mean, you're a data guy, and it's clear. You move, you get better and feel better. You don't, and see what happens, I'll say.
Yeah, without question, that was a great description of the need of good quality cardiovascular exercise. Many of my guests have really said that in reference to exercise, COVID changed the world because people had to exercise at home. They didn't necessarily have to go to a gym. Everybody would say, I'm going to the gym to exercise. And I think my personal trainer friends have said that they're up 40% in home training. But I want to recap the benefits of cardiovascular exercise. Lowers blood pressure, as you said, improves sleep, allows for better insulin sensitivity. It enables you to manage weight. It strengthens your immune system. It allows for improved brain function. It decreases your cardiovascular incidence, which is wonderful. It reduces inflammation, and maybe something not really discussed enough, it balances your cholesterol levels. So we covered the idea of cardiovascular. And, why don't we give some examples of cardiovascular?
Yeah, I mean, cardiovascular is just getting that heart rate up, essentially. And When we talk about exercise prescription, we can talk about that, a little bit later. Exercise should be specific to some degree, especially when we talk about resistance training, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I learned this from this behaviorist. She used to teach at University of Illinois, and she was a good friend of mine. We taught at a couple different conventions together. And it's about getting people to do something sometimes that they're not used to. So get them in the environment, get them in the element that they love to be in. If they like to hike, just get out and go for a hike. If they like to bike ride, go for a bike ride. If they like to be on the water, maybe canoe or paddle. I mean, anything to get the heart rate up. It's the first step. A lot of times, if we're already active, we have our routine. But you know what? How do we change people that are sedentary to motivate them, to get them to do things like getting up and moving that they're maybe not comfortable with? So start easy, start slow, but do something that you enjoy the environment. For me, I tended to be more of a gym head. I would go run on the treadmill at the gym. It's also kind of easier on the knees and back. But then I love mountain biking. So I'd get out and ride my bike. For me, right? Those are the two things I love. So, find something that you love to do in your environment that's kind of in your element that you love. And then also have a partner, if you will, because you kind of keep people, you keep each other accountable. That's the other, who am I going to be accountable for? Whether it's with your spouse, talking with them, a good friend, somebody to keep you accountable in, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do this a couple times a week. And it doesn't need to be much because, as you probably know, if you do 3 10-minute walks, you get pretty much the same benefit if you do 1 30-minute walk. So it doesn't need to be intense. It doesn't need to be, a long, or I don't have an hour to do it. No, you can do a couple 10, 15-minute walks and you're getting the benefits of it.
Indeed. It's funny. You mentioned treadmill and it's spine sparing. We're both chiropractors.
Sure.
So one of the biggest problems that people have when they go to exercise, they exercise wrong, they exercise too much, they're not ready to do certain exercises. So which cardiovascular exercises would you recommend for somebody who just started as a spine sparing exercise?
First off, make sure you have good shoes, right? Because we want people out there not hurting themselves. And if you have, like my kids wear these Converse, right? Because they're the cool thing for the teenagers to wear. You don't want to exercise in a shoe that doesn't have much support. So make sure you have a good shoe that can provide good support, but also some shock absorption as well. Obviously take into consideration any sort of pre-existing condition, knee issue, right? Hip issue. You'd want to do kind of a non-loading or minimal, like a stair climber or elliptical. Just a fast-paced walk is a good place to start. A walk, right, a run is when we actually become airborne. Walking is 1 foot on the ground the whole time. So you know what, I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier. What's best? The best exercise is something that people adhere to in a safe way. And you don't want to do something that's going to create some pain or discomfort, because that's going to discourage you. And then there's this pain avoidance, which we have to then deal with. So whatever that exercise you like doing, that's the best one, I'll say.
So as long as you enjoy the exercise, go do it. Find what you like. Rucking is the big exercise of 2024. Wearing a weighted backpack. So it's walking with a weighted backpack. That's become real popular. Mm-hmm. If anybody needs more information, I can put it in the comment section where you can get a rucking bag. Within that, I agree with you. The question is always, do I do cardio? Do I do weight training? Do I do them both? So we talked about the benefits of cardiovascular exercise. What are some of the benefits of weight resistance exercise?
There's a lot more data coming out, because I think we've known historically for a long time that we should get our heart rate up. We should do some cardiovascular. That's good for us. But what's really interesting is that we get almost the same benefits from resistance training, whether it's a weight or whether it's resistance band. I mean, if we look at pure resistance training, if you do regular training twice a week, you are 21% less likely to suffer from a cardiovascular or have a higher mortality rate. That's just doing resistance training. Yeah, that's not cardiovascular at all. If we want to talk about what's the best, we kind of would want to do both together. But just because maybe during the weather, right? Maybe, where you are in New York, it's, the weather gets bad and it's hard to get out sometimes, right? Literally, you can do some resistance training indoors, and the benefits from a health perspective, back to balancing blood and lipid levels, that's in the data. There are effects of mitochondria within the muscle, which are kind of the powerhouses of the muscle and so forth. There's all sorts of long-term benefits from just doing some resistance training. That's just like twice a week is what the data is showing. If you do it twice a week, there's another study that was like 45,000 people. What they looked at is, it's going to provide lower all-cause mortality when people do resistance training without cardiovascular, just resistance training twice a week. So, it's pretty profound overall, just the benefits. Because I used to always think, okay, we've got to get the heart rate up to get those benefits, right? We got to do the cardio, but you know what? It's not necessarily true. What all the data is showing. So if you don't have the ability to get out and get your heart rate up, you know what? Get some bands, get a couple light dumbbells, and that's going to provide really the same benefit as getting out there on the treadmill, on the bike, and getting the heart rate up. And what's really interesting is that there's another study that looked at firefighters. There's 1,100 firefighters they looked at, and it was a 10-year follow-up from, I think, it was either 2004, 2005, and they looked at them 10 years later. And let me ask you this, or I'll ask everybody out there, think to your head, can I do 10 push-ups? Can I do 20 push-ups? Can I do 30 push-ups? Can I do 40 push-ups? The reason I'm asking is because what this study looked at was the ability to do push-up directly correlates to, they call a cardiovascular event, which is a heart attack. And there is a 90% chance less of a cardiovascular event with the firefighters that could do 40 push-ups or more. And it's linear, which means, if I can only do 20, that's still a huge benefit as well. So, everybody on, kind of think, we're after this podcast, maybe get down and see how many push-ups you can do. And that'll give you an indication of, what's my risk factor. And so simple things like that, because a lot of times we think of, push-ups or resistance training to build muscle, to build strength. But there's clear evidence out there. It does a lot more than just build, bulk and strength. It's really for overall health.
Outstanding. When you think about it, I'm sure that a lot of people, men and women, were starting to say, wow, 30, 40. And you're talking non-modified push-ups. You're talking chest to the ground.
Correct. Now, exactly.
Now, muscle mass is the currency of longevity. Weight resistance allows you to hold on to muscle mass and maybe put some muscle mass on. So some of the benefits, in addition to that, of weight resistance are it lowers the risk of heart disease and diabetes. It allows for stronger bones and better brain health. It releases an enzyme from the gut, believe it or not, that's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, which allows your brain to have brain neurogenesis and rewire. It allows for better movement control, muscle strength and tone, improves self-confidence. People feel better when they look better. And it also controls your body fat, which I believe is the next step in longevity above muscle mass, because a good muscle to fat ratio. So weight resistance is going to allow you to have an appropriate muscle to fat ratio. I believe that muscle mass should be, and strength training should be 50% of your exercise regimen now.
Couldn't agree more. Yep.
So we talk about exercise, the data's there. You gave a great amount of data. It was motivating. And you and I both treat patients. We treat docs, we treat patients. And the patient usually goes, okay, that sounds like a great idea. No implementation. So how do we make them make a habit to exercise?
Yeah. So, there's a few different things. And what I was going to make a last comment in that there was a research study, the British Medical Journal, and they go through about, basically how to treat chronic diseases and so forth. And exercise was one of the component. And one of the, conclusions was, exercise is so profound with patients with chronic disease, it should be considered a drug. And it's like, this is in a pharmacological, based research journal, and they're saying exercise is pretty much better than almost any drug out there, which is pretty interesting.
Can we say that don't let the genie out of the bottle? Because if you do, you're actually exercising then, the health genie, if you will?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. No, so to your question, the challenge is how to get people to really move, right? So, with our business, we work directly with healthcare providers, and the healthcare providers then use our service for their patients. So we're always concerned about, how do we get patients to engage more in exercise, definitely starting out on the rehab side, but then hopefully transitioning into more lifelong after that, once they're feeling better and healthy. And, and what we have found is that, I'm going to generalize, but, some people will, some people want to, and then some people just won't. And you've probably experienced this too, right? There's some patients that be like, you give them everything to do and boom, they're checking it off. They're doing it daily. They're just, they got it. Then you have this other segment of patients that want to do it. And for a variety of factors, maybe motivational, behavioral, previous injury. It's like how to get that group, that kind of third moving and so forth. And so that's kind of where we try and focus in as Web Exercise, a company, is like, okay, what can we do to help, providers get patients to move? Because we have to remember, habits take anywhere from 18 days to 254 days to change. So like 3 weeks to months and months and months, right? So what do we do to change that, right? I mean, as providers, we talk to patients, right, about the benefits. But if you look at what patients remember in the field of health literacy, which is the communication between providers and patients only remember like 20% of what we're telling them. So there's a huge gap of how do we get patients to understand their condition and get them involved. And that's really, what as providers we need to focus on. And as I started before, when you asked about, getting people to do things, first off, get them to do things in the environment that they want to do it. If it's home, great. If it's a gym, great. If it's, hiking, right, whatever. That's the first step for that segment that needs guidance, and then from the other part on the provider and patient, it's twofold. It's a shared responsibility. I always like to talk about. It's the provider and then the patient. The provider has a certain role, patient has a certain role. And so making that understanding or agreement with the patient from the beginning, and this is a relationship we have, that if our ultimate goal is, whether it be getting over a certain condition or an injury or over better overall health and so forth, right? We're going to work together. We can't just treat somebody in the office and then that's all. They go home and sit in front of the couch, have a bad diet, don't exercise, all these different things. So, how do we also do that in the sense of making it easy for them? And when it comes to exercise, we have to remember that it doesn't need to be a lot. A lot of times people think that, oh my gosh, I have to exercise. I got to go to the gym 3 times a week or 4 times a week. It's going to take so much time and so forth. Make it simple. If you look at the research, 1 time of exercise resistance training a week is just about as beneficial as 2 to 3 times. I looked at what's the minimum dosage of exercise to make a change, right? Because we want to change. We want a positive benefit. Once patients start experiencing positive benefit, it starts building in that behavior change. So it doesn't need to be a lot. Literally, if they do it 1 time a week, we want it more than that. 1 time a week, it's going to start making a change physiologically. And as you're saying, when you exercise, you just kind of feel better, right? 1 time a week, we'll do that. 3 sets, 8 to 12 repetitions, okay? And to start off with, if we're the provider, try and make it specific to their needs. For the patients and consumers out there that aren't working with the provider, you know what? That's where seeing your chiropractor, healthcare professionals, so forth can probably help in kind of directing that specific need. Specificity does help. General exercise is good, but when it's more specific and custom tailored, it does work. So, just keep in mind, It can be simple. It doesn't need to be a lot. It just needs to be something to start building that change.
Excellent. So I'm going to piggyback on what you said. I'm going to give some people some additional reasons to stick to the needed habit of exercise. Set some goals. You know, there are people who are goal oriented, but those are the ones who you talked about who said, all right, yeah, I'm going to turn my body around. Find a workout buddy. You know, whether it be your wife, whether it be your college best friend, etc. Set some reminders, put it in your calendar. And I ask everybody, make the commitment. And like you said, and it really resonated with me, pick something that you like to do. Exercise is in work. Exercise should be fun. The people I know that exercise are looking forward to that exercise as that break or their highlight of the day. Now, you also said how much, but many people say, okay, I got to lift. They are under the impression that they have to lift heavy. So you get a 50, 55, 60-year-old guy who lifts that in the day. Remember, he'll say, in the day, I lifted a 400-pound bench press. Do I have to attempt that? How much weight do I have to lift? And I'm going to couple that. I'm going to put the sprinkles on the ice cream cone. Is it dumbbells? Is it barbells? Is it bands? Is it TRX? Or is body weight enough?
Yes. So they all have their benefit, right? A dumbbell versus resistance band versus TRX versus, you know, whatever it may be. What we need to remember, though, is for untrained individuals, kind of that segment that we're really trying to get to as healthcare professionals, or even people listening that aren't healthcare professionals. It's like, gosh, I kind of want to get going. I know I should do it and so forth. Less is more. We saw that with regards to what I talked about earlier with regards to the frequency. Also, with regards to resistance, you want to be able to do lighter weight for more repetitions as you're getting started. You don't want to do more than what's called 50 to 60% of MCV, maximum voluntary contraction. What the heck does that mean? Well, that means how much can I lift for just one repetition? Meaning that if I have a dumbbell in my hand, what's the max weight I can lift for one repetition? For argument's sake, let's just say it's 30 pounds, okay? 50% maximal voluntary contraction would be 15 pounds. So we want to lift about half as much we maximally could or less, especially when we're getting started. That's the key. Two reasons, well, more than two reasons, but a couple of the main reasons are, one is from a safety perspective, right? If we're not familiar with the exercise or really in tune as we're getting started with it, less is more. You can always add more, but from a safety, from a joint standpoint, you know, from what we call delayed onset muscle soreness and the soft tissue, start easy, start light, right? Because the last thing we want to do is go out, get motivated, and okay, I'm going to do this, and then overdo it, and then be sore, and then be discouraged, right? So we want to make it a positive experience. So really start light. Recommendations, 8 to 12 repetitions. I even say do 15 to 20 at first. You know, there's a saying of train movements, not muscles, and that's what we want to do at first. For this novice, when I say novice, just getting back to exercise. Movement matters, perfect form. Strength will come over time. Sounds like, it looks like you have a comment on that too.
No, I'm with you. I am echoing you in my head, what you said. What's interesting is it's all about movement. It's not about muscles. So when we used to go to the gym, what are you doing today? I'm doing bis and tris. It's not about that. You're doing chains. Correct. And it's not just the chains off the ground. You're doing a posterior chain, an anterior chain, a lateral chain. You're doing movement patterns. It makes a lot of sense. You're doing about half of your 1 rep max for relatively high repetitions, 8 to 12, and even up to 15. There's some studies that indicate that if you want optimum muscle hypertrophy, you may even go as low as 30% of your 1 rep max, which blows in the antithesis of that gym mantra, and let me see how much I can lift, because the more I lift, the bigger my muscles on. Well, I can tell you this, and I'm sure that you'll piggyback on that most people who've tried 1 rep max definitely are good chiropractic patients, because we get to see them quite often. Sylvester Stallone, one of my acting heroes, said that he got into a bench press contest with Franco Colombo. Like, what are you doing, Sly? You're 185 pounds. Colombo is an elite level lifter and bodybuilder. And he said, I'm competitive, and I tore my pec, and that's why he had to get all his tattoos. You see the vascularity because of not necessarily which he is lean, but not because he was lean, but because of the fascial buildup and some issues going on in the structure of the muscles. That all being said, you're telling people work a muscle through proper contraction over a period of time with good reps. Don't get hurt. Have some fun. And it's not about doing a bicep curl. You can if you want, but it's all about doing a movement. So begs the question, Dr. Cruz,
Yep.
which movements are you going to tell people to stay? And what do you mean by a movement pattern?
Movement pattern means that perfect control through the range of motion, right? Meaning that if I'm trying to do a bicep curl, we're not throwing our weight around and so forth, right? So maybe if you're doing a bicep curl to start with, stand against a wall. So it's just perfect movement. Single joint, which means just one joint is moving to start with. We ultimately want to move to multi-joint, which I know you're well aware of, which means I'm doing exercises that involve multiple joints, like a squat or doing a shoulder exercise. We'll holding dumbbells, doing a curl and doing a squat, eventually multi-joint exercises. And that's where we want to build strength through repetitions, but we also want to change intensity, not by lifting more and more weight. And so that's definitely for the on the rehab side. So when I'm talking to the healthcare providers out there, we want to build strength through altering the intensity and stability versus weight. And I'll explain in a minute, because if somebody's coming off a shoulder issue, or let's just stick with an elbow issue, maybe a tendonitis, or maybe they had, some procedure done to their elbow and they need to strengthen their upper arm. If you want them to do bicep curls, as they're getting stronger, we don't just want to keep loading and loading and loading. We want to change that intensity by either the resistance or stability. Now, what the heck does that mean? So if I'm doing a bicep curl for my 12 repetitions, and that's, I feel good, I'm getting stronger, I can start to do 15. How about this? How about we have the patient stand on one leg and do the bicep curl? And everybody, next time you're exercising, try that, right? Try and stand on one leg, because what you start doing is engaging a variety of different muscles. It becomes this neuromotor brain muscle body connection, right? And I know, Rob, you know a lot about that aspect of it. And so when we want to progress from a rehab or from a beginning standpoint, and when I'm saying beginning, people that are trying to get back to this level of fitness, change the stability before you change the resistance and add more weight. So there's a variety of different things. There's these balance pads you can stand on with two feet. There's these rocker boards. You can actually do, maybe, for instance, if you're trying to get your shoulder strong, and there's some general resistance band type exercise for the shoulder. How about you're doing a side plank and the up shoulder is doing the resistance band, right? So you're contracting the core, you're holding a certain body position. So we start to use full body, but changing the stability, not necessarily changing the resistance at first. As we get stronger, then we can start layering in some more resistance, but definitely play with the stability component. And that goes with any joint, whether it's the neck, shoulder, knee, hip, whatever. It applies to all the joints. So alter the intensity first with stability, then layering in more resistance.
So could I say stability, key factor for joint health, ability also to generate power, which is a highest level of muscle mass needs for longevity. So stability, mobility, and then ultimately flexibility. I know that's not where we intended to go, but is that a fair statement? Stability, holding the joint stable, being mobile with the joint, and then showing flexibility with the joint.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where, this is the whole other topic we can do on mobility, right? But you're absolutely right. They go hand in hand, and there's certain areas that should be a little bit more stable. There's certain areas that should be a little more mobile. That can be attained with some flexibility, that stretching, that can be attained with massage devices, foam rolls, or these different, self-massage types of tools. Because back to the cardiovascular versus resistance, cardiovascular is good. Resistance training is good. When you layer them both together, it's even better. Same thing with stretching and mobility. Stretching is great. Getting on a foam roll, doing some self-massage is great. But when you layer them together, the benefits are even that much more. So yeah, absolutely. The mobility, the stability is critically important, that flexibility.
All right. So we'll talk about what Peter Attia said for longevity. He said weight resistance, and that could be body weight, any kind of weight resistance. We'll talk about dumbbells and kettlebells, weight resistance. Then he talked about what you said, stability being a one-legged move, a plank. Then we'll talk about the ability to do intense exercise, low intense exercise, getting on a treadmill, going slow, and then high intense exercise, maybe like a Tabata. How would you break those up percentage wise?
It all depends, right? Depending on the demographic. I think the high intensity or Tabata type is great. It really depends on what that goal is. And it ultimately always is dependent on the goal. So I think that's kind of really the question. And that's where I think it would be worth people that don't have a healthcare provider, find one they can work with, whether it be chiropractor, physical therapist, a personal trainer, find somebody to work with you, because as you said, Rob, back to the goals are ultimately important. And unless you understand where you are from a fitness level, flexibility, strength, and so forth, setting up those appropriate goals. So it depends, because for one person getting started, the high intensity might not be as emphasized versus somebody that's more conditioned and need that cross training component. So, as clinicians, it always depends, right? And I would say that with exercise too, it always depends. What are those goals? What is the assessment, flexibility, stability, mobility, and then kind of layering in based on those specific needs.
Outstanding. So let me ask you something. We'll tighten it up at the end. Everybody wants to know, how do I get a flat stomach? So I'm going to hit you with rapid fire. You tell me if you do this exercise. Sit-ups like Muhammad Ali.
I'm already up. I'm standing at my work desk. I stand instead of sit.
Okay, so sit-ups are out. Planks, side planks, they're good.
There's some modified ways to do sit-up. It's called a McGill sit-up. It's a spine-sparing sit-up, okay? That one's great. The old traditional ones, like I remember in high school having competitions for how many sit-ups in a moment where you're, or in a minute, all the way back, all the way up, no, we don't need those. But the McGill curl up is good. Planks are great. Planks, everybody probably is familiar with the plank, face down, side plank. But let me add this caveat in. If you're coming back from an injury, build strength in shorter hold times versus longer. The reason, and this is probably a whole other hour we could talk about this, Rob, you and I, right? So you have stability muscles, which are the deep spine ones, and then you have bigger muscles that move us. The deep spine ones usually are the weak ones, leading to a lot of chronic back pain. And so shorter hold times up to 10 seconds, best activate those. So how would we apply that? We'd get in a plank, hold that for 10 seconds, rest for a moment, come back up, hold another 10 seconds, down, and so forth, whether it's a face down plank or side plank. That is the best way to come from a rehab, strengthening the deep spine. Once we get better conditioned and we want more of a strength and performance, then we can start doing the longer duration. So little side note I went on, but I thought that was important for all the demographics that we're talking to.
Give me 3 ab exercises that you see in commercial gyms that people do that you're like, that is a no bueno. That's not going to help your abs. That's going to wreck your back.
There's one at the gym that you sit in it, you put your knees under it, and your arms are up here, and you're crunching, right? So you're in an upright position, using resistance, right? So a lot of times people are lifting, and you're using more what's called your hip flexors. So you're not really even getting into your abs. And then you're doing up here, so you're pulling with your upper body. So you're really not getting the abs. So it's probably not doing a heck of a lot. The other one I see them doing is there's a 45-degree angle, okay? they go on it and they're leaning back on it and they're going back and then forward and back and then forward. And all you're doing really is loading the back a lot more than you really need. You don't necessarily need a lot of weight, a lot of load, a lot of resistance, or they'll grab this 45-pound plate and do that sort of thing. You don't necessarily need to do that. Best ones are plank, side plank. You can do some oblique in a very similar way to the McGill, which is a spine sparing, which means the McGill one is you don't come up very much into a typical curl and your back is a little supported. I would say that's all you need for functional strength, right? If you're talking bodybuilding, that's a whole other discussion. But we're talking about 99% of the people out there. Hey, how do I make a difference in my midsection? Besides, obviously, diet and exercise, these will make a difference.
So the whole premise of the core isn't just to have the proverbial washboard six-pack. It's to hold your trunk in place so you can move your periphery, your arms and your legs, and also to allow for a co-contraction in your abdominal region to hold your natural corset, not to hurt your lower back, because as we both know, 8 out of 10 Americans at some point have lower back pain. So you and I are going to purport one of the first things they should do when they go to the gym or exercise is do core strengthening, or better yet, core activation. So now that we all talked about the core and the critical element of adding it to everyday exercise, let's finish up with lower back. Let's talk a little bit about getting our lower back in shape so we can do weight resistance and not visit the chiropractor 3 times a week for perpetuity.
Okay, perfect. So here's an interesting side note that's going to lead me into some of the exercises which everybody can do on their own without going to the gym. Do them in the gym if you want, but if not. So there are 3 exercises called the bird dog, and I'll explain that, side plank, and then the curl up, which I've talked about. Now, the significance of those is they've been studied extensively in the in the literature and the research. We had experience as well through research. In 2016, we were involved with some research with the University of Southern Florida. And so what the researcher, who was a DC PhD, who's a department chair of the School of Rehabilitation, Dr. John Mayer, his life work was your exact question, low back and back pain. And what he was studying is how to get, what's the best way to get your back strong, and how do you do that? How do you apply it, and so forth. So they had firefighters throughout the Tampa area being involved in research. And what they showed was that they put a trainer in the firehouse and they went through those exercises. They did the McGill curl up, they did side plank, face down plank, they did the curl up, and then they did have that extension machine where they just did a low back extension, okay? What they showed was that the firefighters got better. Where we came in was that it was expensive to put a trainer in every firehouse. So they compared it digitally using our platform, a version of our platform that was completely self-directed by the firefighters to supervise to them, did nothing. And so this went on as a 2-year study. And what we showed is that supervised is great. We were actually more effective in less lost time from work, less disability, and so forth, giving people access at their fingertips to do the programming. Point being is that decreased disability, back pain, early retirement, and so forth with firefighters by doing those exercises. The bird dog, you're on all fours. You simultaneously extend one leg and the opposite arm to your body level. We don't raise up super high arm. The leg stays nice and low to hip level. And the reason being is because it's a core exercise. We want to keep our core stable. There should be really 0 spine movement. And that's when I go to the gym, I see people doing that bird dog where it's alternating left and right, and their arms going up high, their legs going up high, and their spine just going like this, right? It's not the purpose of that exercise. It is holding your core stable like a plank while moving your arm and leg. We talked about the face down plank, side plank. We talked about the hold times. And then that curl up where your hands are underneath your low back and you're literally curling up just a quarter of the way, tightening the abs. And that actually shows some of the highest EMG for your abdominal muscles, okay? So just those 3 exercises alone can make a significant, or can have a significant effect on somebody with low back pain, because it targets your deep spine stabilizers, it targets your larger muscles, and then targets what were we saying, multi-joint movement as well with that bird dog. So super easy exercises, but again, train movement first. Movement matters, and so those are so simple, low load, no load, but some of the best exercises to do.
Yeah, the reason they call it the core is it's the centerpiece. And the reason they call it a plank, and I saw a trainer do this, is it looks like you're walking the plank. No plank is like this. It's like this. Now, you own and host a great online, it's called Web Exercises, where you can utilize both as a consumer and as a practitioner specific exercises. So in a concise manner, tell them where they can get it from you.
Yeah, well, we mainly go to healthcare providers. So for the consumers out there, go to your healthcare provider, your trainer, your chiropractor, your physician, whoever that is, and tell them you want to do their exercise at home, and Web Exercise is a way for them to get that. And the reason we go to straight to the healthcare professional is that I'm under the belief that the right exercise for the right person gets the right results. And so when patients would come to me, or to you, Rob, or to any other healthcare provider out there, they're coming for a specific condition. So that's what we help do, is we help get providers, patients, easy access to their exercise specific, tailored by their healthcare provider. So healthcare providers access thousands of exercises and stretches, tailor it down to these 5 for you, Rob, because those are the 5 that are going to best serve you, and you never want to overload patients. So yeah, so we have a exercise prescription and a home exercise platform, as well as a full learning academy for healthcare providers, which you've been gracious enough to be on as well.
Webexercises.com. It's been my pleasure. Everybody, let's get moving. Let's try to virtually exercise something every day. I'm Dr. Rob Silverman, Proven Health Alternatives. Special guest, Dr. David Cruz.
Thank you very much. Move well, live well.